I think most of us are actors, right? Yeah. And that is, I teach from time to time, very rarely, but when I have time, I teach a master class, and I'm going to be teaching one tomorrow at the Atlantic Theater Company. And I've been going over my notes, and several notes, but the one that makes me smile all the time is the one that I would like you to think about the next time someone comes backstage. And you know those people after a performance, when you're very vulnerable, you're most vulnerable, after your performance, and you're not sure what happened, and you're waiting to hear what people have to say. And there are certain people, friends, who want you to know that they thought you were terrible. But they want to say it in a nice way. They say, gee, you really were something. And they do it in such a way that they communicate to you that they hated what you... But here's what you do when they do that to you. You say, thank you. It kills them every time.
Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Academy Award winner and SAG Award winner last Sunday, F. Murray Abraham. I know that you teach, but that you also still consider yourself a student, really, of the craft. And I remember hearing a couple of years ago, Glenda Jackson was in town doing Three Tall Women on Broadway, the British actress, and you went to something. You were in the audience when she was on stage, and you were asking her a question about the difference between British and American actors.
How did you know that?
You mentioned it in an interview once.
Oh. Yeah, I asked her, what is the essential difference between British and American actors? And she really thought about it. And she said, in Britain, it's a job. And with Americans, it's their whole life. And I wonder if there's a way to balance those two. Because sometimes we do tend to make it much more important than it is. It is called a play, after all. We forget to play, don't we? I don't forget to play. I really have a good time.
So I mentioned introducing you your Academy Award for Amadeus and your recent SAG Ensemble Award for The White Lotus, which is a sensation, and so I want to eventually talk about those two things tonight. But to start with the Magic Flute, what I love is it's a contemporary film with a huge fantastical element, but you're back in the world of Mozart. Now, when you first got the offer to play this guy, did that occur to you right away that the sort of synchronicity of that your familiarity with that world, having studied it when you played Salieri?
It's not really only synchronicity. Generally speaking, because it's been a long time since Amadeus, when I get material that says this has to do with Mozart, I usually in my mind reject it because I have another life. I mean, I've done a lot of work since then, but this material was terrific, and it was a great idea. The idea of actually introducing, magic. A magic flute, but I also one of the best things about acting, being an actor, if you're successful at all, is that you travel. I sometimes think that's one of the reasons I became an actor, and this was in Salzburg, and I had never been to Salzburg, and the money was okay, but it was also a place it was also, it was Mozart's birthplace. And I always feel a slight obligation to him and to Salieri, because it changed my life for the better. Anyway, it was a wonderful experience. I hate to keep gushing about these things, but if I don't like a thing, I'll let you know. I really liked this company of people. I was there during the pandemic, early part of the pandemic, and Salzburg is a beautiful city, but it depends a great deal on tourists. I mean, a lot. I mean, it's not only Mozart, but it's also where they filmed Sound of Music. I don't know if you know that. Really? Yeah, I found that out, and it's a huge, even now, a huge tourist attraction. But with no tourists, I mean, they were suffering. So I got to see all of these places with the people who ran the institutions because they were empty. And I heard some people, the people were playing on Mozart's pianoforte, his own, the one he played on. But my point is, there was a whole magical thing about making this film. And largely it was because of what you said. It was the presence of Mozart. I'm telling you, it makes a difference when you're in the middle of a historic place that you're filming. I promise you it makes a difference. And I think it made a difference here.
And you mentioned your colleagues in the film, and I wanted to just mention a couple of names of these young actors. Jack Wolf is the lead. He plays.
He has a beautiful voice, by the
Tim.
way.
Yeah, and I think is this his first film or one of his first?
I think it is, but that's him singing.
Yeah, that's great. And then playing your daughter is Nima McCormack.
Right.
And so you're playing the father of like a 20-year-old, and which has a complication all its own. But what about being with these young up and comers and being?
Oh, that's one of the reasons I teach from time to time. Yeah. I love being in touch with another generation because it first of all reminds me of my own ambition, and I love to see it and feel it. But I like to see what's going on. Acting changes; it evolves. It does evolve. And if you don't stay in touch with the other generations, you're going to shrivel up and die. I really mean that. And being in touch with them and their energy, well, it feeds me. I just I teach not only to give, but I get as much as I give.
And your director,
and that was true of this film.
Yeah.
They were all much younger than I.
Well, your director was much younger too, wasn't he?
Everybody's much younger.
No.
It's okay. It's all right. No complaints. No, he was, and he was full of energy, and it was his first film.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was so generous and had a very good cinematographer who was very helpful to him, and everybody, yeah. And he got along. They got along well. Everybody got along well. It was charming.
You've worked with really experienced directors, but is it its own kind of adventure to work with someone who's doing it for the first time?
Well, I have to tell you, man. For me, it's always an adventure. I mean that. It's always. I never know what's going to happen. You know, I'm talking like. We always talk about our successes. My failures are as painful to me as yours are to you. There are some times I used to do a play, not many of them, fortunately, but when they're bad, it's the first thing you think about in the morning. You get up and you think, I got to do that play, and I'm no good. And you get to those passages and you think, oh, God, I'm suffering more than they are. And you try. It's funny, but it ain't funny. But I've lost track of the question.
What I like too about this, and we all just watched the film, is that it ends right as the performance is beginning. So it's left up to us, basically, and as you say, I mean, it's not so much about, well, it is about the performance, but it's also about everything that leads up to it.
Yeah, that was one of the most charming things about it. But since we heard some of the music, it was a good taste. It makes you want to see the performance, I think. Yeah.
And you mentioned the filming in Austria. What about the big building where the school is? Was that a real building or was that a set?
Oh no, it was a real building, and some of us lived in it. By the way,
really? Well, I guess during the pandemic.
Yeah, but also it was so convenient. I mean, you're there and you go to work. It was great. But it was thrilling to. Can you imagine going to school in a place like that? It was really. I got a couple of 100 years old. And in great shape. It was like a hotel school. It was sensational. It was one of the good jobs that comes along once in a while.
Well, let me switch gears to talk about White Lotus. Now, were you in? Because you
Boy, talk about a great job.
you said your cast. I guess they elected you as the representative to give the speech on Sunday at the Screen Actors Guild Awards, and you said it was the most fun you ever had. Really,
It is. That's a it's a long career, and that was absolutely the best. I've had some good jobs, but those of you who saw White Lotus, it really looks like that. It's as beautiful as you saw. We didn't fake it or put color eyes or anything. Sicily is really that gorgeous. And we had the hotel, which was originally a convent, which was converted to this you saw it, this luxurious hotel with a staff that loved us because we were all having such a good time. We were staying in such an elaborate place. But one of the best things about it was I tend to talk too much. I'm sorry. Cut me off if you have to. But we all stayed together. Cast, crew, everybody lived in that same hotel together. And we went and we all ate together. And we all worked together. As I said in the acceptance speech, it is true. And it really contributes to that, the oneness of the family. There's another director I've worked for who does exactly the same thing, by the way. He puts everybody up in the same hotel, and we all eat together, and at these big tables. He insists on a family. It's Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
And his films show that, I think. Anyway, that was what contributed to the great experience, as well as living in Sicily and eating that, fabulous food. And I'm half Italian. I was right at home. I was just right at home.
For those who have not seen it, you're in for a lot of surprises, of course. But I'm sure many of you have seen it. What did you think when you first read through the script and realized all these crazy twists and turns?
No.
With your character.
You don't know all the twists and turns because he's writing it as we go along.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he can write it. He can write it a whole thing overnight. He's remarkable. He's the producer, writer, director, and he's a guy you want to work for. I mean, I know you want a job, you work for anybody, but for this guy, you really want to work for him. Him and Wes and the Coen brothers. There's a handful of people I'd work with for the rest of my life if I could. But you read a script like this, when they sent me the first couple of scenes, I went, well, give it to me. This is great stuff.
And is it true, like, with someone like Wes Anderson, and you just mentioned the Coens, too, I mean, you've had smaller roles, bigger roles. You've even done voice work for Wes Anderson in Isle of Dogs. Is it kind of like almost just you don't have to even know exactly what the part is? Of course, when you act it, you do. But just say yes to someone like Wes.
To Wes?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll say yes before he asks me. Are you kidding? He's very loyal. I did that wonderful film, Grand Budapest Hotel.
Oh, yeah.
That was where we first worked. Then we worked on Isle of Dogs, which I never heard before until you said it. It's Isle of Dogs.
I love dogs.
I love dogs.
Yeah.
I never put that together.
Yeah, that was.
Thank you. It was a real isle, by the way, that a king from a couple hundred years ago in England had for his dogs. He went dog hunting, and anyhow, in the next film he did, I was working on something, and he wanted to include me in the film, but there was nothing for me to do. So he said, I have a day's work for you. Would you like to fly to Paris? If you've never been to Paris, put it on your list. It's really pretty. He said, come on. He said, the food is... I said, I know what the food is like, but I can't get away. But what I'm saying is, he was willing to fly me to Paris to spend for a day's work so that I could be included in his family again. That's the kind of man he is.
Very nice. Very nice. Wanted to link back to someone else who's in the who won a SAG award, and that was Ki Hai Kwan, the great actor.
Great. Pretty amazing speech, right?
Oh yeah, and just as someone who myself who grew up in the '80s, it's very emotional actually to see this guy who I still recognize that little kid.
We all do.
But I want to talk about what happened to him, because he was acting for a while, then he was lack of opportunities, he was gone until someone came along and gave him a chance. And in 1983 or '84, a man named Milos Forman,
That's right.
and Saul Zaentz, who was the producer of Amadeus,
Right.
They could have had any top A-list. Al Pacino apparently was circling. He wanted the role of Salieri.
Everybody did.
Everybody. Didn't somebody even come with their own makeup and costume?
Yeah. Some very famous people would show up with their customers, with their own personal makeup, man. Famous box office personnel. I mean, do you know anything about the history of that film?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it was a play.
The play was internationally acclaimed. It was well over 30 languages. It was big, yeah. And it seems like as though, at least when I traveled to different countries to work, I would run into someone who had wanted the part or who knew about the performance and would tell me that whoever it was in Russia, for example, he won the top honor. Everyone who played the part won the top award. So,
and here in New York, it was Ian McKellen, we should say.
Here in McKellen, yes, he was here in New York and he won the Tony. Mm-hmm. But my point is, everybody wanted the part, and I was nobody. And well, it's a long story about how I finally got him to see me. He wanted. Can we talk about it?
Yeah, please.
Let me tell you.
This is about acting.
I'll make it. Yeah. There was a point in my career where I decided I didn't want to do any more of the smaller roles, and I definitely was tired of the way Americans seem to worship British actors. I happen to like them very much, but I don't worship them. And I certainly don't think they're better than American actors. I know it's not true. Anyhow, Brando changed the face of acting, and they know it, but they still don't pay tribute to what we can do. Or at least they recognize what we can do. My point is, I knew that it was going to be done by a British actor. It was written by a Brit, for a Brit, and the Britons had... And so he called bunches of us, he called for us to come in and improvise certain scenes. And I said, I'm not going to do it. I've done that before, and I don't want to. I want to play Salieri. I thought, make a shot. What the hell? And, of course, they said no, and then he called again. Come and improvise and be part of this great film. And I said no. And the third call, they said he wants to see you he wants to interview for the part. I'm not sure where it came from. I'm just pure luck and good fortune. But anyhow, I went to see him, and he and Saul Zaentz, the producer, were at this desk at this office, which was in a brownstone on the east side. And I was there to talk to him, and I was pretty excited. But Milos kept looking at his, getting calls on the telephone in the middle of me answering him, and he'd put it down. He'd say, now, what were we talking about? Then the phone would ring again, and I was like, oh, this is crap. Why did he call me? And I had a temper. And I kept looking at Saul Zaentz, who was there, and he would go, there's... So when it was over, I shook him hands, thank you, bye-bye. And I went up to see a good friend of mine and bought a 6-pack of beer and said, I am so pissed off. And 2 days later, Milos called and said, I want to test you for the part. And he invited me. He sent me the sides. I went to his hotel. I happened to do the scene with an actress I had worked with in the Seagull, and we talked about it. And then the next day or the day after, I went to the recording session, and that was I was living in Brooklyn, and I'm working on it on the way, the subway ride, and the recording studio up around 57th Street. The elevator was broken, so we had to get to this most important audition of my life in the service elevator around the back, one of those great big elevators, those great huge things. So I had to walk through this appliance store to this big old service elevator and go up there, and the doors open, and it's full of these actors actors and people running around and yelling and getting ready, and there are people studying their scripts, because they're going to go on tape. We used to tape in those days. It was called videotape. Anyway, she said to the casting woman, all right, go. Are you ready? I mean, you want to sit down for a while? I said, this is Salieri. Don't put me down here in the middle of a whole bunch of people. I want to give me a little solitude, please. So she showed me there was another little place a little further away. The point is, it was an offhand thing. And I went in, and I was going to do the thing with, it turns out, another actress with whom I had worked on a John Guare play. And good actress. And I did the scene, and she was dismissed. And he said, now, Bori, do the old man. I said, Milish, I'd be glad to, but give me a chance to look at it. I didn't look at it. He said, no, just do it. So I did it. I faked it. I did the whole thing, and when I finished, I looked up to see his reaction, and he was gone. Oh, I knew that was it, man. He hated me. So I went in and I tried to get a copy of the tape. People were a little more generous in those days. By the way, that's how I learned to act in front of a camera. I did a lot of commercials, and I would study the auditions. Anyway, the point is, I knew I didn't get it. And 2 days later, he called me and said, "You're my first choice." Wow. And then I said, "Thank you very much, but what does that mean?" "Now you must talk with the producer and the writer." And I said, "Oh, well." So I did meet Saul finally, and then some time passed, and I did meet with the wonderful Peter Schaffer. Anyway, they started negotiations. And at the time, I was Brian De Palma had cast me in Scarface, but I hadn't accepted it because he said, "Murray, when are you going to, good guy." I said, "Can you hold out for a while? There's something." He said, "What is the other thing?" I said, "It's Amadeus." He said, "Oh, well, okay, I'll wait as long as I can. But we can't wait forever. And I got a family, man, So they continue, and they go, time passes. I accepted Scarface, went to L.A. to rehearse it. Al had real power, and he's a generous actor. And he insisted on a whole week's rehearsal, like a play, with the entire cast. Very rare, very expensive. And I was rehearsing this whole thing, and in the middle of the week, first week of rehearsal, I got a call that I got the part. And the word spread pretty quickly, and people would come over, and they were so happy. An American, a nobody got this great role, and suddenly I was being offered rides here and dinner there, and and I ended up doing both Scarface and Amadeus at the same time.
Amazing.
It was great.
One was in Prague, one was in California.
Yeah.
At the same time. So that means a lot of frequent flyer miles.
It was very romantic. And it wasn't that hard because the two parts were so different. They were so different that it was easy to adjust. And I studied the role as I was flying, it's a long trip. And I would perform, then I'd fly back and study the other role and back and forth. But also Czechoslovakia, Prague, Czechoslovakia at that time was under communism, under the Russians. And getting in and out of the country was funny. I mean, it was like, you had to go to Vienna to get a plane to get to Hollywood, okay? So that means you had to drive past the border. So I would be driven past the border at the end of a shooting day when there's nobody there except me, the driver, an empty car, and these customs guys, these Russian tough guys. And we would stop. I mean, this is late at night. And they would wander out to the car. Then they'd wander back to the shack. lets you know who's in power, you know? It's not just that they were Russian. That's not the point. Anybody who has that job wants to exercise what little power they have. I understand that. But it was like, to me, it's always funny. I mean, there's nothing here. I got nothing. I'm traveling light. I got my script. Anyway, it was a great story, a great adventure.
There's one other thing I wanted to ask. I think I heard you say that. So when Pacino found out that you had gotten Salieri,
yeah,
that he had some advice.
Al came over and he said, "Listen, Murray, we knew each other. We weren't real good. We weren't good friends. We knew each other, New York." And he said, "Don't try to carry the whole movie on your shoulders. Just do your work." That's Al Pacino.
It was very. I've interviewed people who work in makeup, including people who have won Oscars for makeup, and they have told me that they think the single best character makeup in the history of movies is Dick Smith's work on you as the old Salieri, and he did win an Oscar as well as you did, because they said it's a much older man, and I forgot how much of the film actually takes place with the older man, but we recognize you in it. It's not this makeup that is.
Yeah, it was a good trick.
Yeah, your face moves with it. And I just wanted to bring up what I was remarking on when I watched Amadeus again recently, how funny the performance is.
He's funny.
Especially in those old man scenes.
Yeah, the old man is a funny guy. He has a very dry sense of humor. He's sweet. But this thing about that compliment about the best makeup, I don't know if you know it, but Dick Smith was a great innovator, a genius. But his makeup won Academy Awards for Dustin Hoffman. Marlon Brando, he did Marlon Brando's old man makeup in Godfather. I don't know if you know it, but he had, me, and there was one other. Anyhow, it wasn't an accident. 14 hours in the chair the first time we worked, 12 hours the second time, and then each time thereafter, it was always 4.5 hours in the morning before we did principal photography.
And one other thing about Salieri himself, I know that you've been defensive actually about the way he's been characterized. The movie is very complex, so it's not some simple black and white depiction of him. But I know that after the film, you've participated in some retrospective events for him. In honor of him, in Austria.
He was a great man.
Yeah.
Really, Salieri was a great man. He also helped to teach Mozart counterpoint, but he also dedicated his life to music and to widows of musicians who were destitute. He would raise money for them. He established an institution for them. He was a good man.
We have to wrap in a few minutes, but I have two other questions.
I told you I talk too much.
No. I was one of the lucky ones who saw that Shylock that you did. It was terrific. And I actually also, at the same time, Pacino was doing it, and I saw both, so that I had a chance to compare. They were quite different.
Yeah, ours was better.
I thought it was. I thought it was better.
We did it in Stratford-on-Avon. We did that production 2 blocks away from where Shakespeare is buried. And we were part of the Royal Shakespeare, RSC's. They did all of Shakespeare in 1 year, everything he ever wrote. It was called The Complete Works, and we were part of it. And we were a big success, I'm glad to say. Hooray for American actors.
So there's one other anecdote that I've heard you tell, maybe only once, so I wanted to see if you'd repeat this. There's a story about working on Homeland, which we should also give a big round of applause for. Amazing. And you had an idea, though, about your character that was a secret. I think you know what I'm going to... And you had the costume department do something to your
There's
trousers.
something that I like to do in films that I make, in any of the things I do. It's a secret thing that I make up for my own self, for my own character, that I don't tell anyone else about in the cast. and certainly not the audience. And it's a little thing for me that adds to the mystery of the character, I think. And in this one, Dara Dahl, the character I played, a character I really liked, I told the costume department that I thought he was, not only was he bisexual, I think he was up for anything. Anything at all. I said, I believe he wears ladies' underwear. And one day when I came to get dressed, they had sewed lace on my panties. And I wore that for certain scenes. I have to tell you, I think I mentioned this once before, but I'll tell you, I would never tell you this, or anyone this, if I had been still doing the character. That's a secret. But now I don't care. I wonder where those panties are right now.
But that must be something, I mean, for everybody here, that it certainly adds something to the performance.
Yeah, it does. I've done a lot of close-ups without any pants on. Who knows? I mean, these really serious things with no pants. You got to have some fun, man, you know. We do tend to take ourselves a little too serious.
And you were just telling me about your sneakers, which I was admiring. I have a very similar pair, and you told me that you got them resold recently.
Yeah, well,
they look great.
Yeah. I can't get rid of these things I love so much. Do you all have the same problem I do? You have clothes that you can't wear, but you don't throw away? One day.
Well, Murray, congratulations.
I suppose why I'm relating these very personal things to you all is to remind all of us, each of us, that what we do is a human thing. Sometimes I think we tend to separate ourselves from the people that we're working to communicate with. I think so. We get so involved in ourselves. I think we got to be careful of that. I mean, sometimes it's important to focus and concentrate. It's very difficult. I know. And I also know that when you go for months without work, it happens. That when you get the job, it becomes urgent. And be careful of that.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you.